Good evening. Welcome to Supper with Sean. Got home tonight and been trying to consider what on earth I'm going to talk about tonight. And so kind of came to the consensus just in light of multiple things, really. If you think about Brexit, if you think about if you're in Illinois, we think about our government that doesn't do anything and can't handle conflict or issue resolution. They certainly aren't persistent. They're persistent about one thing, and that's about not doing anything. But, as I think about really what I talked about last night of short-term, we are a very short-term society. We don't think about what does our decision today, how does that impact us tomorrow? And, really thinking through how do we manage conflict in our lives? Because most people don't like confrontation. And arguably, well, not really, it is arguable, but people have to communicate. And when people aren't good communicators or they don't want to upset someone, they don't want to confront an issue. Now, failure to confront an issue tends to lead to a lot of things, whether that's in our families, whether that's in our jobs, whether that's in our churches, our communities, or in the issue of Brexit. It's proof that people weren't being listened to, and you could argue, did they confront an issue? Well, they did, but were they trying before this referendum vote? So as you think about how do we handle conflict, and are you willing to be persistent? Because, and I might have mentioned this, I don't remember if it was last night, but there is nobody else in this world that cares more about you than you do. Maybe your parents, they care a lot about you, but most of the time there's one person that's responsible for you, and that's you. So as you think about a conflict, and absolutely, yes to persistence. Persistence is key, because if you're going to give up, I can guarantee you that you're probably not going to be successful. You're not going to get through the conflict because you're going to give up on it. And you can't give up because, A, life isn't easy, but B, conflict is hard, and it takes time to resolve that. And some conflicts are easy enough that they might be resolved in a day. Others might be months, 2 months. And some might take time. Some might have to initiate a plan. Some might have to get other people involved. Some might have to do with family and maybe a reorganization of the business. There are tons of different conflicts, but failure to recognize the conflict and identify why the conflict occurred or the problem, and I kind of use those somewhat differently, because you may have a true head-deep conflict that is pretty well serious, and you might just have a gap or maybe an error in judgment that isn't a really big deal, but you need to address it. So both of those are things that you have to think about. You have to be willing to identify them, and those are hard sometimes. Sometimes you need people to come in and advise or counsel on the situation. Sometimes you'll be able to take care of it. You'll be able to identify what is the problem, what is the conflict, what is causing the pain and agony. And sometimes, it doesn't have to be what anybody else feels. But being willing and able to go to the person or the team or the group that you're having a conflict with and address the issues. This is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm seeing. Help me understand why it is this way. Can we get better? What can you do? What can I do? And make it about you. Because if you all of a sudden take the blame, so to speak, indirectly, now all of a sudden the opponent, whoever you might have a conflict with, is letting their guard down to understand that you're willing to be a part of the solution. So try to get them to help you understand how you can help them help you. And I know that sounds like a lot of work, but you have to be persistent. And sometimes it's not easy, because conflict is often painful. Truth hurts. We know that. But I can tell you from experience, the moment that you start to be truthful with you, with your family, with with others and understand, here's the problem I'm facing, help us get to a resolution and fix it, it's going to be painful, but at the end of the day, the relationship is going to be more solid than what it was before. Why? Because you have been completely honest with that person or that group. They know exactly that you didn't pull any punches. It may feel like it, but after the fact, if they give you due credit, you didn't pull any punches, you were honest, you were upfront, and you wanted to solve the problem. And that's what it's all about. And as you follow this whole Brexit thing, the fact that the government didn't want to wake up and solve the problem that the people highlighted is why that vote went that way. So, you know, as you listen, as you think about the U.S. government, as you think about Illinois government, the government isn't listening to what the people are saying, right or wrong. And I'm not saying Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or Independent. I'm not saying any of those. It's a matter of the larger group of people aren't listening to who they report to. And they might think that the people can't take the country back. You saw it in Brexit. And you wonder why the Civil War and the Revolutionary War happened. Those are because people wanted change. They saw where things were going. They wanted change, and they took matters into their own hands. So it is possible. But it was persistence. You didn't just quit on a war. You kept fighting because you knew what the principle was. So as you think about having a principle and understanding what is the conflict, what am I going to solve, and doggone it, when you do that, it's got to be a conflict worth dying for. Not dying, I say. It's got to be worth fighting for, right? Persistent. And maybe the battle is worth dying for. But you've got to understand, is it a hill that I'm willing to stick my stake firm in the ground, and I'm not going to waver? Because if that's in your career, you might take some hits over that. Is it a career limiting move? Potentially, maybe not. Maybe it's the right thing to do. But you have to think long term, as we talked about that last night. You've got to think about that long term. Is that something I'm willing to risk if I'm going to stand on that hill? So you've got to do it. I encourage you to do it. But if you're going to do it, you have to be persistent and see it through. So understand the conflict, manage it. Change is good. It's uncomfortable. It is very uncomfortable. And it's frustrating. There's uncomfortable is putting it lightly, that's for sure. But you know, you just got to think about how can you help navigate that change. Find the positives, weigh in on those positives. Don't focus on the negatives. We have enough depressing stuff in our lives. We don't need any more of that. So you've got to weigh in, focus on those positives, be persistent, because nothing lasts forever. So we can all make it through it. You know, life's too short to worry about that and let conflict ruin and come in between you and people. Hashtag stand on the hill. We're going to hashtag make it happen too. And, you know, so you just got to be willing to be persistent. And at the end of the day, if you're persistent and you treat people with respect, the conflict will go away. You'll find a solution to that problem and it'll work out. So all the best to you as you try and solve the problems. Thankfully, we're not probably solving the problems of the world, but we are our little community one at a time. So when you're around people, try to make it work because life's too short to have enemies. So with that, thanks for watching Supper with Sean. We'll catch you tomorrow night. Have a good night.